thank you everyone for joining from various places. I know it might not be a convenient time for everybody, so we appreciate you joining us. So the support of the community is really valuable to us in terms of testing the specific use cases that real users and implementers go through. So we see this as a really valuable part of the quality assurance approach we're trying to push out here, so that we can really get feedback before we end up pushing out issues that are going to cause you real pain. So hopefully this is really useful for you too, to get a preview of what's coming and to give us this really necessary feedback. The beta testing process that we're running here is a bit experimental, I must say. So please bear with us and feel free to give feedback on this process itself as well. In addition, this demo approach that we're doing is pretty experimental. We're trying to give you an overview of most of the key features as we see it for this release. We've got quite a small set of features. Some of them are quite large features and contain many new bits of functionality. But of course, you're not getting a complete picture of the features and issues that we've fixed or included in this release. But hopefully the product managers who go through the different segments as part of this demo will give a bit of an indication of the sort of features coming into the release from their side. So the structure of the meeting, I put this draft agenda on the beta testing webpage. So this is what you get if you go to our website and go to beta testing. So the agenda is, firstly, I'm going to go through a little bit about the process that we're trying to follow. I'm going to try and keep this quite short. And then we have 3 segments where I'll hand over to each one of the product managers for the different streams of components that we're managing for the DHIS2 core. So this will be analytics, then what we call apps, which also contains a lot of other kind of configuration details, and the tracker features. And so the product managers will give a bit of an overview, and then they'll go through onto the demos, where some of the developers are involved in tuning in and demoing the specific features. So a word about questions. If you have questions during this presentation, please try and use the comments field in this platform we're using, Zoom, because we feel it's already quite a long, potentially, meeting for many of you. As I say, we've limited the number of features we want to go through to try and make sure it's not too long. But just to keep it in control, if you can use the comments to raise questions. If at the end of each segment we have a bit of time, we might be able to look at the questions and answer some immediately. Otherwise, we can either use the comments to respond, or we can take them offline, and we'll get back to all of you with the question and the answers following the meeting in the next day or two. So, right. So I'm going to go through a bit about the process to begin with. So again, I've tried to capture most of the information on this webpage, but I'll be updating this as necessary. So basically, I'm just going to walk you through this here. So the purpose of the beta testing is really to capture either existing features that have been broken, so regression. These are things that would have been broken since the last release, 2.30, or to look at new features that we've introduced and look for issues in those new features. So make sure that they're working, that they do the right job they're fit for purpose. We're not particularly interested in issues that are also existing in previous releases. Of course, we're interested if they're newly discovered. They can be raised as usual in JIRA. But we specifically, for the beta testing, we want to focus on issues that have been introduced in the last release cycle up until 2.31. So there are various ways you can participate in the beta testing. The easiest is to go to one of our demo instances, which are, the links are given here. So we have these 2.31 release candidate 1 plus an A and a B instance. They're all the same version based off this tag that we've created now for the release candidate. So they're based on our demo database that we have on these Play servers that many of you might be familiar with. Another option is to run the system locally. So you can either get hold of the WAR file that we've built for this instance, or you can check out from the GitHub repository on this release tag, 2.31 RCE1. If you need to use a demo database, we've got a version, there's a link here to the version that works with this, this release. There's an important note if you're running on your own database that usually the process of upgrading is we give out upgrade notes and upgrade scripts to move from one database schema to the next. From 2.30 onwards, i.e. with 2.31, we have a new feature where DHIS2 will take care of this upgrade for you, but it will only work from 2.30 onwards. So if you're coming from an earlier database version, you'll need to go through the normal upgrade process to get a 2.30 compatible database. Then when you run DHIS2 for the 2.31 version, it will make the upgrades necessary for the database. There's one thing I haven't caught here yet. We've got it in our release notes we're preparing, but we require Postgres 9.6 onwards for this release. So that's a requirement on 2.31. Yeah, so small note here about we've got an improved build process now. So if you build this release yourself, doesn't matter when you build it, you won't get different versions of the system, which has been a problem in the past. Now you will get exactly the same version of the core and the apps that we have prepared for this release. So if you find issues, and that's what we want you to do, then we'd like you to raise them as usual in JIRA. So the link is here. Hopefully you're familiar with it. The project should be DHIS2 software. The issue type is bug, because that's what we're looking for, either bugs in new features or bugs due to regression, due to things we've broken elsewhere. And importantly, the affected version is this 2.31 release candidate 1. This is what allows us to filter out and see what's coming in that's specific to this beta test campaign. So that's really important for us. And as usual, if you're raising issues, please provide all of the details necessary. So all of the steps that you went through in order to reproduce the issue, how you set up the data, etc. Make use of screenshots where you can. These things are really helpful. That means we don't have to go around the houses trying to reproduce the issue. We can get on with finding the root cause and fixing it. Finally, just a note about timescale. So, ideally we'd have many weeks to do a beta test campaign. We have a release planned in 3 weeks' time, well, just under 3 weeks. That means effectively we only have about 2 weeks to really get useful feedback back from this. So we really ask people if they're interested in checking these things out and giving us feedback. Do so as soon as possible. Things that come in this week will be really valuable to us in terms of being able to fix them in time for the release and make sure we get a really good stability going into this 2.31 release. So I think that covers my section of the process. Before I hand over, I just wanted to make a really big thank you to the development team here, because I've thrown this on them at kind of short notice, and they've all kind of pulled together to make sure we can make this process happen and can give a demo to help you guys see what we're trying to get out there. So now I'm going to hand over to Scott to take us through the analytics.
Team is, we're trying to be as transparent as possible with our roadmap. And what I was just saying was that you can go into JIRA and you can look at our analytics dashboard. And you just have to go into dashboard, click Manage Dashboards, and then search for it, star it, and then it'll show up here on this left panel. Just real quickly, and this will kind of tell you what we've been doing this last release, is on this first left column is total analytics tickets. So you can see that we have a lot of tickets, 1,500 tickets, but most of them have been done over the years. This is not so much important. This middle column is what we're currently working on, or what we've been able to finish in this current release. So you see that we tried to tackle about 92 tickets this release. We managed to, if we scroll down here, we managed to get through the majority of those. It's quite good. And these other 7 in progress testing and the 1 in review are also going to be finished for this release as well, hopefully. You see that we still have 24 that we didn't get to at all, and we have 2 that are just open. Some of those we just didn't get to them, others we've decided not to do it intentionally. But what have we been working on more specifically? If we look at this pie chart, you can see that the vast majority of the work, just in terms of number of tickets, has been on the new Data Visualizer app that Jan will demonstrate in a minute here. This is a completely new redo of the old Data Visualizer app, and I think you'll all be pretty pleased with it. After that, we've been doing a lot of improvements and adding new functionalities and improving performance to the Maps app. Austin's going to demo those. In terms of new features, these are the bulk, the Data Visualizer app and the Maps app. The rest of these apps that have tickets that have been completed are mainly bugs, which leads me to the point that we have done 21 bugs this release. 9 of those are from RCAT specifically, so the HISP community, and we've done 45 features, 6 of those being from RCAT. One thing that I just want to point out before I hand it over to Jan is that what you're seeing now with the analytics is kind of the next generation of DHIS2 analytics. So we had the new dashboard release in 2.29. That was a dramatic improvement over the old dashboard app. New UI, new functionalities. We're going to be making continued improvements to that. With 2.30, you saw a new Maps app. Again, new UI, massive improvements in terms of features and functionalities. And now for 31, you're seeing a new beta version of a Data Visualizer app. So you're starting to see a very similar user experience come across all the apps, and these apps are dramatic improvements over the old apps. And that'll be kind of the continued trajectory of analytics. Just to mention briefly, since we rarely get the opportunity to talk to all of you, is what we will be doing. After this, we finish up 31, we're going to have to revisit a bit on dashboards. There's some high priority functionalities there, like new data types, improved filtering, new filters. We also need to better cover the clinical user experience. So frontline healthcare workers, what kind of dashboards do they have? That's a very different user than what DHIS2 has typically been applied to. There's still going to be a lot of new features coming into the Data Visualizer app, new chart types, scatter plots, multi-axis charts, legend sets for charts. So this beta release is you're going to see a lot of reproducing what we had in the old app, but the next app, the next release, which will be probably in about 6 months or so, will have significantly more functionality. And then finally, we realized that there are still a lot of bugs, so we're trying to schedule in a bugathon. I appreciate that there's a lot of struggles out there trying to get your bugs onto the roadmap. I know it's hard. We do have certainly limited resources here, and not everything can be super high priority all the time, from our perspective at least. So we are planning a bugathon. We do hope to be more responsive to bugs in the very near future. So that's all I'm going to say. Then I'm going to hand it over now to Jan, and he's going to show you the really cool stuff, which is the new apps.
So hi everyone, I'm going to try to share my screen. Yes, share screen. So you can hopefully see my screen now. And I can see from your screens that there's a noticeable lag, so I'm going to try to do this very slowly. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the latest analytics stuff, and for our team, this release has been mostly about the new Data Visualizer app. But I'm going to start by showing you a new feature in the dashboard. So this is the dashboard, and I'm going to click the interpretations icon on one of the items. And so now you should be able to use what we call rich text, meaning we support the markdown syntax. So I'm going to try to demonstrate rich text. I'm going to try to demonstrate bold text by using asterisks. You can do italic text by using underscore, and you should be able to do smileys. So I'm going to click post, and you can see that it shows up formatted. Another feature is that you can now mention other users in your interpretations. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to try and tag, for instance, the admin user. Check this out, and then I'm going to post. Then I'll head over to this other window where I'm logged in with the admin user. I'm going to click messages, and you can see that there's a new message saying that this other user mentioned you in DHIS2, and there's the message, and there's a link to the interpretation in the dashboard. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at the new Data Visualizer app. And so I'm going to show you what's new in this app compared to the old app. So I'm not going to show you things like translate, share, interpretations, and those stuff, because they work the same way as in the old app. So instead, I'm going to focus on the new features. And the first one I would like to show you is the new global header bar. So in the old app, we had this custom header bar, putting the chart title, for instance, on the toolbar. We had these custom buttons. Now instead, we're going to use the global header bar. So it's pretty clear that we're in DHIS2. You have quick access to interpretations, messages. You can easily navigate to other apps, and you have your personal stuff right there. The next feature is the layout area. So I'm going to start by showing you the old solution. So first of all, in the old app, you had to click this button and open a dialog to even see the layout. Then in those dimensions here, you have no idea whether they have items selected in them, or like even if they have items, then there's no way to see which items are selected. So I go back to the new app, and you see that we have this new layout area that's always visible. There's a clear indication whether the dimension has items or not. So if it doesn't have items, then it's marked with a gray color. Those that have items, they're marked with a green color, and you can see right there on the label that one item is selected. And you can easily see which item is selected by just hovering the chip. Then you get a tooltip with the names. So for instance, I can go in here, I can select another period. I go out and I hover over, and you see that the tooltip is updated with the latest items. Okay, so let's move to the next new feature, and that's called drag and drop dimensions. So I'm going to go back to the old app. So to add dimensions in the old app, you got to go to one of the panels, start selecting items. Then it will show up somewhere in the layout. You have to click this button and see, okay, it was added to series, then you can drag it around. In this new app, there's kind of a new workflow. So instead, you start by dragging your dimension into the layout. So if I want to add it to filter, I drop it here. And if the dimension is empty, the item selector window will open right away. You can see now that the dimension is empty, but if I select an item, it becomes green, and it says one selected. Inside the layout, you can drag and drop. So if you want to put, for instance, organites on series, you can drop it here, and data will get swapped back because we only support a single dimension at series and a single dimension at category. And we also support keyboard interactivity now. So if you want to move data, for instance, to filter, you can just use the keyboard, open this menu, and I'm going to select move to filter. You saw that it was switched to filter. If I want to move, for instance, this dimension to series, I can use this context menu. And then to show the chart, you can click Control, Enter. Okay. So the next new feature I would like to show you is called recommended dimensions. I'm going to go back to the old app again, and remember that this list of dimensions could be really long. And if I want to go and look at ANC visits, for instance, then it could be really hard to know which dimensions would work along with this data element. In the new app, I'm going to go and select the same data element. So now I'm going to select the ANC first visit, and you will see that there will be another green dot here next to location fixed average category. When I click update, oops. Okay, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go and select ANC first visit. I click update, and you can see there's a green dot next to this this category right here. I hover the green dots, and it says dimension is recommended with selected data. So remember that this solution is not perfect, but it gives you an indication of which dimension work along with the selected data. I mean, we don't scan the whole database and tell you where the exact data is, but we do kind of a best effort guesstimation of which dimensions would work based on looking at categories, for instance. Okay, so the final new feature I would like to show you is a new chart type that is called year over year. So I'm going to start fresh, and we're going to open the new period type selector, which is basically the same as before, but it now has year over year line version and year over year column version. So I'm going to select year over year line. And then you see that something happened up here in the layout. Filter is the same. The period dimension is deactivated because instead of using the period dimension as you usually do, instead we have a drop down in series and a drop down in category. So in series, you can select the years you would like to analyze. So I'm going to go ahead and select 2018, 2017. Then as the category, I'm going to select months per year. As filter, I'm going to select the root organid Sierra Leone, and I'm going to select an indicator as data dimension. So I click update, and now what's special with this type is that we're looking at periods both as series and categories. So we can now analyze the development over time, like months in those years for 2018 and 2017. And if you like, you can select columns instead of lines. So that's it. Yes, we really want you guys to test this app before we release it, because it's completely new, so it needs to be completely tested. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it over to Austin to present the latest map functionality.
Austin needs to share his screen.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you can't hear me. I guess I'll also ask if anybody can hear me. How do I go? Okay. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. It's the just the agenda at the moment. Again, let me know if you cannot or if you cannot hear me. So what I'm going to present is a few new features that we introduced to the Maps app in 231. They're a little bit not as big of an overhaul as the Data Visualizer app, because the Maps app is relatively new itself. But we got some new features that hopefully will be useful for everyone, and we'd love feedback and some hands to help test those out. So start off, this is the Maps app. You might see a couple stylistic differences as well as the global header bar, similar to what Jan introduced in the Data Visualizer app. And the first feature I'm going to talk about is called Style by Data Element. So as you're adding a new events layer, I'm going to use the inpatient morbidity and mortality layer in this example. You can now go to the Style tab. I'm going to click on View All Events so we don't see clusters, just because it's a little bit nicer to look at. And you can now select a data element for styling those events on the map when the layer is added. So for instance, I'm going to use age in years, use a predefined interval of every 10 years as the kind of differentiator for different colors in the legend of this map that we're going to create. And then I'm going to click Add Layer. So that's going to add the layer to the map. And now, as you can see, we have, I'm going to go ahead and switch this to a dark base map so that we can see it a little bit better. we have the color of these individual points in this event layer are colored based on, you can see the legend on the left here, are colored based on the age of the patient for this particular, in this particular case. And as you saw in that add layer dialog, you can select many different attributes based on the layer that you select, as well as the different differentiations within that. You can also create automatic distributions and select your own color schemes and things like that. So that's the first kind of visualization tool that we've added. It's called Style by Data Element, and there's some pretty powerful things you can do with that. Just to clarify, I used view all events instead of group events, because if you have the group events selected when you add this layer, you're going to get the same behavior, but you're going to see the layers grouped in clusters, and so you don't see that the colors of those events until you zoom in to see those individual points. But for smaller layers, you're able to see all of that with selecting non-clustered event layers. That's the first feature. Second feature we're going to introduce, here we have a nice and colorful little example here. And in this case, we're going to demonstrate downloading an image of this map, which you can then use in a report or send in an email, something that's been very highly requested. And so I've already added two different layers here. One of them happens, they're not necessarily related in this case. One of them happens to be measles coverage, and that's a thematic layer. And one of them happens to be the morbidity and mortality rate, which is an events layer. I also have a dark base map. And what I'm able to do here is click on this new download button in the file menu up at the top. And then you get a number of options. So this is a saved map. So we have the name, it's just called example morbidity and measles. And you can select whether or not in the image that you download, you want to save the name or show the name in that image. So you can turn that on and off. You can also select whether or not you want to include the legend in the image that will be downloaded. And what position you want that legend, where you want that legend to be positioned in the image. So right now the default is in the bottom right. You can also select bottom left, top right. Let's go ahead and keep it the default in the bottom right and keep the title there on top of the map. And then we're going to click download. And what's going to happen now is this downloads an image, and hopefully you can see this when it comes up. Yeah, and so now we have an image that was downloaded. It is, basically exactly what you saw. It's a PNG image. You can then use that in anywhere you would use a normal PNG. You can see that the name was included and the legend was where we wanted it to be located in the bottom right. And those features here, when we're looking at these options, are very useful because, for instance, you might not want to cover up some important piece of data and you want to position the map just right for that image, and so you can move the layer legend around as you would as you like to make that happen. Or you can hide it completely and hide the name and just download the image itself. So that's hopefully a pretty powerful feature that will be useful to a lot of people. And the final feature that I wanted to demonstrate is downloading data. So for the power user use cases where you want to do something that isn't possible in DHIS2 Maps app, because we're not a full-featured GIS application, you might want to download this data, this geolocated information, to do more powerful analytics or visualizations using existing software. And one of the free example pieces of software that are out there that allow you to do powerful GIS analytics is called QGIS. So I'm going to demonstrate this feature using that software. You can download it for free online. Another one is ArcGIS Desktop, which is a pretty powerful tool that is not free. That's a commercial software. software. Those are two of the kind of common solutions that are used for GIS analytics. So what we're able to do here is, again, I have two different layers already pre-populated on this map. On the left side, you can see I have an event layer for malaria case registration, as well as a thematic layer for slept under LLITN, which is another malaria in the malaria program, a layer. And what you can do now is you can expand this more actions menu, and I'm actually going to do the thematic layer first. You can expand this more actions menu where you can access the data table, edit the layer, remove the layer, those types of things. But now you have this download layer option as well. So you can click on this download layer, pops up a little dialog that for a thematic layer just tells you kind of what you're about to do, which is to download that layer in a GeoJSON format. It's a little bit advanced, a little bit technical. If you don't know what GeoJSON is, it's probably not something that you're interested in, but if it is, you're welcome to go and look it up. It's the kind of standardized format, open format for importing geographic data into QGIS or ArcGIS Desktop or other types of software. And then you can click download, and it just downloads that file. It's a .geojson. It's basically a text file with all of the information included. And then you can go and import that file into something like QGIS, which I'm showing now. And I've already imported that file directly that I downloaded earlier. You can see this slept under LLITN layer. One thing to note is that because of the basically the way GeoJSON is structured, it doesn't include styling information. So you saw that there was a legend and there were various colors of these polygons in the Maps app for DHIS2. That's not automatically the case when you export that data because you don't have styling information, but you do have all the data available to do that styling yourself if you'd like. So if you click using the information tool, you click on one of these polygons, you can see on the right side here all of the information about that particular org unit for the slept under LLITN analytics, and you can see that the value is 48, it has a range, it has a color if you wanted to style it yourself here in QGIS as well. That's for a thematic layer. I'm now going to go and demonstrate this for a events layer, and there are a couple different options for events separate from what you get when you're trying to export a thematic layer. So if you go to download data on an events layer, you now have two options, and these are selecting basically the format of the keys as you export this information to GeoJSON. So once again, if we wanted to have the ID of the GeoJSON properties be the name of the property, as well as, so this is particularly for data elements where you have things like age in years, whether that's going to say age in years or the ID of that particular property or the code of that particular property. And then for the rest of the categories to be able to select between ID and name, you have use human readable keys. Again, you click download. This one actually goes to the server and downloads the full data set because when we have an events layer that has clustering on the server, we don't necessarily have all of the data available locally, so it takes a little bit longer than a thematic layer. But it'll then go and download that information from the server and again download it as a GeoJSON. It's taking a little bit longer than it should, but hopefully that doesn't mean my server's down. Anyway, this goes ahead and downloads that file, and once it's downloaded, I have it preloaded here as well. You can see that you've got all of the points of this malaria data. There's quite a few points here, and so that hopefully I didn't mess that up. I'm gonna go ahead and redo this scale so that maybe I can see it. There we go. I zoomed in too far. So if you click on one of these points, there's quite a few points in this particular malaria layer. And that's why it takes a while to download. We'll go back over there and hopefully it'll be downloaded when we finish. But when you click on the information of this particular point, you can see this one was downloaded with the name and human readable keys. So you can see age in years is 20 for this particular point, gender is male, etc. And you have the human readable name of these additional keys. If you were instead to select the ID and non-human readable keys, you would get what we're pulling up here, which is basically the exact same layer, just with a more machine readable output. So it has the names in the keys for these properties in ID format. So that's the third feature. Oh, and it looks like my server went down, so our data download failed, but you could try it again. And you would get that, basically that GeoJSON file that you can use in QGIS or ArcGIS Desktop. That's the third and final feature that we wanted to demonstrate for the 231 release of the Maps app. And so now I'll turn it back over to either Jan or Scott to finish that off.
Hi, can everyone hear me? I'm not sure if I can.
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, then that probably means everyone else can hear me. So I'm just going to, thanks very much, Jan and Austin, and welcome Austin to the team. I think most of you don't know Austin yet. He's our latest analytics developer, mainly working on maps right now, assisting Bjorn. One quick thing I'm going to say before I pass it over to Victor to go through the Maps app, or sorry, the whatever it is that Victor does, apps, is that, you know, with the analytics apps, these are meant for all end users. These are not admin tools. These are not tools that are meant to be only used by, you know, people with a really high degree of computer literacy. These are meant to be also used by people at the lowest levels, district levels, facility levels, to be able to interrogate their data. And when you're testing, please don't test for just, am I able to click through this and it does what I think it should do? But also think with these super low level users in mind, is it intuitive? Is it simple? Are they able to find what they're going to need to be able to find very quickly and easily? And if it's not, then that's something we need to fix too. It needs to be very simple. The goal with these new apps, dashboards, maps, and data visualizer, is that the amount of training, the amount of money spent to get these people up to speed to be able to use these apps, we can reduce that. We can lower the barriers to using analytics and DHIS2. And we can really get it into everybody's hands. So please, as you're testing, think about the lowest level users. Think about not just, is the button working, but is it where I think it should be? Does it make sense for it to be there? Does what it showed me make sense as well? From a district, facility, lowest level user perspective. And if it doesn't, please let us know that as well. Okay.
Hi, I'm Victor. I'm team lead for the Team Apps team. We work on apps. If you haven't figured by the name, we're going to demo a couple of features from the four apps we primarily worked with this version, with our maintenance, import-export, user app, and user profile app. In addition to that, they've been our focus, but we have fixed over 40 issues, over 16 apps, and added something like in the north of 35 features during this version as well. So this is going to be a small slice of that. And with us, we should have Bilk, who's going to demo the maintenance app, Adil, who's going to demo the import and export app, and Hendrik, who's going to demo two apps, the user app and the user profile app. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Bilk for the maintenance app demo.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
We do. I'm going to mute myself now.
Good. Okay. Just trying to do this sharing. Just trying to find the correct window. Can you just do? Let's see. Here we go. Can you see the window now? You see it window? Hopefully. Just maintenance. So there's been a lot of bug fixing. I'm going to be quick here. It's just 2 small features that I like relevant to show. I have to wait a second. Need to move. Oh, okay, sorry. So one of the features is this, just a manage column. So before we had like these fixed columns for each element. Now we can basically choose the columns for the list that is relevant for that object. So we can like show the code, the ID, the URL, save, updates, and then you can see this columns here. And the idea is that it should be easier to see at a glance the information for each object. And the thing is, this is saved per user. So if you go into another user, it doesn't mess like their columns up. It's saved for your user in the data store. So you can set to default, updates, and it's back to default. So this is for every object has this, and the different attributes or list of elements you can have based on the object from the server. And we have an idea to expand on this with like multiple, like you can change in line on the lists, maybe further down the line. And also another kind of new cool feature is a smarter search here. So you can search for names, like part of the names, and also the code and the ID. So if you know the ID of an object, you can just get the ID, search for it, and yeah, so that's for the code and the names. So really small features, but it's a lot of bug fixes as well. So I think that's for me, Victor.
Cool, thanks, Björk. Next up is Adil with the import-export app.
All right, it's a bit big. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, so this is the import-export app. The main stuff that has been done in this phase, the last phase, has been to fix some bugs internal to the code, refactoring a lot of those things which are not seen, but they're quite important. I mean, it fixes a lot of the bugs, and it fixes a lot of the issues with the lag, like how you click around and then you just see them like right away. The entire interface is very responsive in that sense. So a lot of optimizations like these have been done. So on the left is the import export. On the left sidebar, we have the export. In the metadata export, you can either you can select all or you can select none, and then you can hit export. And if I do that now, then probably the server would hang completely for all the demos that are preceding. So I'll not do that right now. Similarly, the data export, we've added this property children to include descendants of organization unit or just the particular selection. For example, if I come here and just select this one particular unit, then this default option enables the possibility that I don't have to go and select all these other options down here. When I export, they'll just get exported. Then similarly, some of the okay. So this is the event export. So similarly, some improvements have been made here in terms of how we lay out stuff, and internally there are a lot of improvements with regards to this. Metadata dependency, export with dependencies. So basically, it's a very simple kind of thing. I won't elaborate much on this, except it's just you export stuff out and then import stuff back in. And that's pretty much the gist of this entire thing. Like you export stuff out of the metadata export, and then you come into the import part, and then you choose a file to upload, and then you just select a file, upload this, and then you get some log here. So there's one change that has happened from before. Is this that I'll probably just maybe export a couple of these attributes from here. And then I'll come into import, choose a file to upload, metadata file, and then once I upload, then you can see a import summary on the top here. So it disappears upon every single import. The errors that you see, the conflicts that you get, and all these kind of issues that you normally get with the import process, you see them. And apart from that, the logger doesn't open by default, the console, but you can open it from the bottom, and then you can see what has been changed. Like, it's almost the same information as the top, but still, this is the summary, and then this is the log, like what happens on server side. I think that's about it, probably. I'll stop there.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Adil.
Thank you.
And last one up is Hendrik with the user and user profile app.
Hi there. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. And now that you can also see my screen, yeah, some small new features on the user management app are the fact that you can now see the last login date of a particular user, which is quite handy if you want to send follow-up messages or re-invite people. Another new feature. Oh my God. It seems like the server has some problems at the minute. Oh, it's just my session. On the edit page, you can now also add some direct messaging fields, WhatsApp, Facebook, Skype, Telegram, and Twitter. So this can be done by user managers, but also a user himself or herself can go to the profile section and also add those fields. And another new feature for the profile app is the fact that you can upload profile pictures. And if you don't like them anymore, you can also delete them. Yeah, so some really small features there, but still useful things to have. I guess that's about it that I have to show.
All right, thank you, Hendrik.
No problem.
That about covers the 4 demos from Team Apps.
Okay, I'm going to demonstrate several things with Tracker. This, just so you know, there's also in Jira a Tracker dashboard, the same way that Scott was showing. You'll see that for 231, more than half of the issues that we worked on were stability or bug fixes, because we loud and clear know that we're trying to make Tracker a more stable performance. A lot of that has also been backported as well. So there's meant to be a number of fixes in that regard. But I was going to show you some of the new features that we want you to play around with and see how they work for you. So one of them, again, is a little bit, as Martha was just talking, from the Android point of view. We're trying to have better user experience and more customizable kind of look and feel. So just was going to show some basics of that and then move into what the actual program looks like. So I just created today actually a very simple program to demonstrate some of these things. Fingers crossed that the server here responds well and likes us at the moment. Maybe it thinks we're logged out. It's been a while. It does. Okay. So you may have seen with the Android releases the ability to add colors and icons to a number of different areas, colors to programs, colors to stages, icons for data elements, icons for the programs themselves. So just to say, those are now being consumed by the programs themselves. So as you're here in the browser, you're able to do the same. Select a color or select an icon. I've chosen a very happy icon for today, hoping that everything goes well. And I'll show you what that looks like in the program itself. just so that you know, we also are going to be demonstrating the new Capture app in just a few minutes, and there's going to be a lot of changes when we get around to adding the tracker functionality to that app. This is all about the existing tracker app and consuming what we can of the changes to the look and feel that we've introduced before Android. So if I go into this program that I've just created, you can see now that we're having a color and an icon associated with it. You know, it's probably tiny on your screen, but it's there, I promise. I'm going to take a look now inside of this program and show a couple of other things. So a number of the priorities that are driving Tracker right now are to enable not just Android, not just stability, but particularly to enable the use case of collecting data at the point of care or the point of entry, the point where data are generated. So one of the sets of features that you'll see now are some changes to the forms styles that are possible. So we have a menu here that will give you various different ways to represent the same form depending on what is easiest for the form design that you have. So if I go to the default form, it's the form that everybody is most familiar with. The data elements are laid out in a way that is very familiar. But I can also switch to a more tabular entry, a grid kind of format. So I can add here, and it's, again, there's some default formatting that goes on that is based on the length of your form or the style of the different data elements that you're using. So of course it takes some playing around with to make sure that everything looks the way that you want it to look. But you can add this now as a default function and save this for your users, what you would like the form to look like. You can also do a pop out of that data entry. So rather than have that tabular form, you can also directly go in and have a pop-out form that lays on top of the screen. Again, a lot of this is about trying to give you, as the person configuring, more options for presenting different lengths of data, very long forms, giving people that are entering from paper to the screen better options for doing quick data entry. So these are some of the things that are default modes now that are available in that menu. Another thing I was going to show while I was sitting here inside of a tracked entity instance, you may know that we've been working on the relationships model in Tracker so that it's a lot easier to create relationships between tracked entity instances, but also between a bunch of other objects as well. But just to give you a sense of what that's looking like now, you can go into, as you're in a tracked entity instance, you can select a predefined relationship, one that you've decided is important for your programs. You can go searching for that person and add them directly in this tracked entity form. So if I come into the child program, I'm able to find the person that I was looking for, do a search, and link them as a child to this mother, for example. There's a lot more that we're going to be able to do with this model now that it exists in Tracker. We're going to be introducing relationship analytics in the future that will give us more granularity and better control over these things. But again, this is kind of a starting point to get us to have more opportunities for the future. I was also going to show you one example of why this tabular entry was so strong, but now I'm not so sure that this is going to work. It looks like my security certificate for this expired while I was sitting here. But this is the new immunization form. I won't refresh it. We're working on this for WHO. What this is giving me the opportunity to do is represent basically the entirety of an immunization card that the care providers are very familiar with looking at. Each one of these columns is a different vaccine. And now, because we've got this very default tabular data entry kind of mode, then it looks familiar to them, and then they can proceed with entering a new set of vaccines based on what they already see here. We have a bunch of rules associated with it as well. But visually, it's meant to give them a feel like they are working still with the paper form that they're familiar with, something that they have a very easy time reading. All right. Next thing I was going to mention, we've added a number of different expression types or functions within the rules engine that are going to be quite powerful. So I wanted to give you a sense of what those look like. The program indicators. So we have, let's see. We've added in a function here for the ability to count the relationships, D2 relationship count. We've also added a function for days between events, between stages. I want to show you a little bit of what that looks like when you take advantage of these and the kinds of analytics that we're going to be able to do. So we set up just a couple of these with some new data. There wasn't much test data yet, but let's take a look at child relationships here. And I'll look at this week. All right, so if I take a look at week 46, you can see in the past we didn't have any of these as part of the data set, but now at this point we are starting to be able to count the relationships. We're going to be able to do a lot more with that. The other one I wanted to show quickly was this function for the days between. This is something that, again, when you have individual data, you start to get really interesting analytics that you can do. So this is the average days between an ANC visit and their care at birth visit. So looking out over the data set, you can see, you know, over the last year, there's an average of 27, 24, 23 days between an ANC visit and them coming in for care at birth. These kinds of analytics are going to give a lot more detail to the program managers, to the health providers, to the clinicians themselves about what's going on with their populations. You'll see there's a lot more in the documentation about some of those new functions in the rules engine, and we're going to keep adding to those based on what we learn from our clinical use cases and from the care providers that we're working with. Another one that I wanted to show you, I probably should have shown this before I left that individual tract density, but let's go back a little bit. Actually, let's do this. So we're trying to do a lot more with geolocation now. You saw a lot of what's going on with the maps. There's going to be more and more of that as well to help people visualize what's going on with their different use cases. One of the important aspects for us was to be able to figure out the malaria elimination use case, which find where I'm going, which required us to be able to track a focus area, which is not predefined. It's defined by the epidemiology of the disease. And so they wanted to be able to pretty quickly mark out on a map what this focus area looks like and be able to track it over time, the number of cases that appear in that area, what kind of interventions are done with that area. So I wanted to give you just an idea of what that looks like. I'll cheat a little bit with this program that I just created. Let's just pull up a building here. I'll come down in this tract entity type that we're defining as a building. I could change the feature to, for example, a polygon. And so now this tract entity type, if I register it as a new tract entity instance, again, I'll go back to my program cheat a bit. We're no longer tracking a person tract entity type. We're going to track a building in this instance. And I'm gonna do the ever important cache clean. I know many of you are familiar with the fact that we clear the cache all the time when we're doing this. We're actually optimizing that as well. You'll see in the future with the new capture app that it won't have such a hard time being stuck with the previous cache. All right, let's see if this is actually going to work for me. Go into a okay, so here I'm registering a new tract entity, and I have the ability to zoom in here on the map and define this tract entity. So I can decide that my focus area is this spot. This has now become the geo dimension for this tract entity. And I'm going to be able to follow it over time. You saw from the map visualization that one of the thematic layers that you can now lay over top of the maps is the tract entities layer. The tract entity, again, can be a point, which is a very obvious case that you capture every incident of something. But being able to follow it now as also a polygon of some sort and the information that can be captured within that area is going to have a lot of impact as well. All right, I have to just make sure what else I was going to show. I think I'm ready to, at this point, just move on to showing you what the new Capture app looks like, which is just out now. Some of you have maybe seen the beta versions of this. We've been working on it with a UX designer and with the Tracker team. This Capture app is meant to replace Event right now and Tracker in the coming 7, 8, 9 months. I don't know, Marcus can tell us otherwise. The idea is to have a unified experience for data entry for the users. You're all, I'm sure, very familiar with the old Event Capture and what it looks like. The new one is, it of course has the same elements that you're used to from the geography, from selecting programs, from entering new events, but it's all meant to be laid out in an easier to use format and also built on an architecture that is meant to address any of the stability issues from the past. So you can see you actually can go back and forth between whether you're starting with an organization unit or a program. The smart selector here is going to determine what is available to you based on which org unit you are in. You can do registration here. You're immediately going to get your list, line listing of all of the events. They're pre-selected with some of the categories that you've defined in the configuration, which now have a smarter sorting. Rather than just top to bottom or something, you can now set things like the min and max so that you have a bit of a working list here to be working with. Of course, you can also organize it and add additional categories to the list. When you enter into it, again, it's meant to be a bit cleaner, a bit easier to work through in terms of finalizing an event before submitting and creating a new event. Again, looks like something that we hope is familiar enough. It's not going to be too jarring for users that are used to using the event app, but is meant to be a big improvement. If at any point I end up changing where I am, the smart selector is going to protect us from entering data into the wrong program or into the wrong organization unit. It's going to help us to start again. We always have the option to press the button to start over. So we're trying to mimic kind of two different key uses for events here. One is the poor district data person that's sitting there with a stack of papers and needs to quickly enter information for all of the different org units. So they need to have a quick selector for these organization units. They need to be able to switch between programs, but we don't want them to get lost in their program. We don't want them to enter data in the wrong org unit. So that's a key driving use case for this. Another was, again, the ability for those that are entering data one at a time individually to move very quickly through it. So for example, in an immunization campaign, at this point, mostly that's being captured on paper because it's very quick to capture a couple of data elements. With the improvements to Android, with the improvements to the Event Capture app, we're hoping to help people to do more quick data entry in that way. And this same style and the decisions that we're making for the design are going to be adopted by Tracker in the future. So that's the piece that we're moving on to. But we're very excited to have your feedback now on the new Capture app, help us to know if we've made the right decisions. We want to be able to get more information from users in the field as well. So those of you that work with users in the field, I mean, please do feel very open in giving us your feedback. We are actively in the design process for this for the future. It's laying groundwork for what a lot of the data entry is going to be for DHIS2. So with that, I know I had been given a little bit more time, but maybe I won't drag it out. Do we want to open up to questions at this point? Let's do that.